Introducing Belinda, 36, a self-employed marketer and influencer, and Craig, 42, a barrister. They'd been married for 15 years and have 2 children. They were struggling with emotional disconnection, and that was exacerbated by Craig's multiple infidelities over 9 years ago when they came to see me. That had led to deep impacts on Belinda's mental health, and previous counselling attempts had had little progress. The initial assessment revealed avoidance as a coping mechanism and lack of remorse from Craig. The avoidance contributed greatly to the resentment that Belinda felt and triggered her own abandonment issues from childhood trauma. We conducted Gottman assessments, and that highlighted deep loneliness, communication barriers and unresolved trust. Depression and anxiety were identified due to the increasing division and lack of emotional intimacy and connection between the two. Both admitted that if it were not for the children, they would have separated by now. The goals included healing from past trauma, rebuilding trust, and prioritising their marriage for the sake of their children. We followed the attune attachment model from the Gottman Institute as a 3-part necessary process that I take all my couples suffering from infidelity through. Now, as part of that, what I've recognised is that when I do take people through this path, it's a lot of hard work. It's not easy, it's not comfortable, and it can be quite triggering. So when I'm working with my couples to set them up for a little bit of a smoother process, if you like, is I help them work on their self-awareness so that they can learn what's going on for them in any given moment, so that when they are having these conversations, they can recognise their emotions shifting and changing and when they are becoming triggered. So we can set it up for a little bit more success rather than being triggered and someone running out and slamming the door, for instance, or something like that. I teach them how to take a time out. So I incorporate not only the Gottman therapies into the way that I work with couples through these traumatic times that they're suffering, but I also incorporate the work of Terry Real. So things like how to take a time out, how to have a quick conversation about something that doesn't require going into too much long-winded conversation that sometimes people can struggle with, for instance, with a rapport style conversation. So they had options that they could draw upon. And I also encourage them to have a reprieve and some space from talking about the problem repeatedly, but that wasn't too much of a problem for them because avoidance was their coping strategy, and as Terry Real would refer to that as a misery stabilizer, along with things like alcohol or working to excess to avoid talking about the problems. So there's many different ways on the avoidance checklist that from the Gottman Institute that this couple identified strongly with avoidance as part of their way of managing and just keeping their relationship stuck. So it was in a really stuck, sad place at the beginning. So we work with them on their self-awareness and helping them to learn strategies for managing their emotions, using mindfulness and some of the audios and the hypnosis and meditations that I've included in the members area of the website, and a lot of the resources that they've been provided. So there were lots of techniques that we incorporated into that. So they engaged in activities to deepen connection and manage conflict constructively. So the progress was marked by their commitment to the process, overcoming the setbacks and implementing the strategies that we provided to them, such as the timeout, such as the self-soothing techniques that they learned, understanding themselves and why things were triggers. We did deep inner child work, and they began to think not only about their own awareness of themselves, but they also learned how to think more relationally about one another, and that brought about more compassion and understanding in the way that we did that through deep inner child work, recognising that a lot of what was going on now in this current situation and the fear response to the abandonment suffered by Belinda at the time during her childhood was re-triggered by this infidelity by her husband, and that was unpacked, and we worked deeply with her inner child to help with the healing process. And there were also things that we did with Craig with his inner child work as well. And that generally does come up for most of the clients that I work with, which really helps when they're learning the communication exercises that you learn when you're doing Gottman therapy, which most couples counsellors will do. But I also work with that part of your brain that in the moment, the compulsion to do what you've always done will be far greater. And this couple was no different. And so their go-to was avoidance, so they would stonewall one another most often and go to opposite ends of the house. Sometimes he would retaliate and go one step further and actually leave the house and go and sleep at their apartment overnight as well, which would bring about more loneliness as well. So we set some boundaries around that, and we help them be able to communicate with one another through a difficult discussion in a safe way, so that they were able to allow themselves to be vulnerable, to understand that they're both hurting from different sides of the same coin. And it's very delicate work that we're doing, and it's a delicate balance to make sure that they're getting the emotional support from me, from one another, as the three of us go through these sessions together. And importantly, they're doing the work and the homework that I provided outside of session. So what set this couple apart from many others that I work with, and why they came through, with gold star, if you like, is because they committed to doing whatever it takes, no matter what attitude. They were determined. And having their weekly couples catch up, each time they would come in and they're like, yes, we struggled, but we've still been having our weekly couples catch up from the website that we provided to them. And because of that, that has been the glue that's become a ritual of connection now for them. That in recent email update from them, that they said that they're still having, at times they still do struggle, but they're in a much, much better place than what they had been before, where they were presenting to me when they were on the brink of separating and looking at divorce and going through that process. So part of what I teach couples, and a big part of what I incorporate into the work that we do, is I help them to connect to those parts of themselves during a difficult conversation. Their compulsion to do what they've always done, that I referred to before. Their compulsion to walk away, to avoid the topic altogether perhaps, to get defensive, to fight to win, fight to be right, to yell and scream and talk over the top of their partner, to retaliate. All these things, these are autopilot behaviours from the freeze, fight and flight response that we all have within us. It's innate, it's in all of us, triggered by the fear centre, the amygdala in our brain. And when that's triggered, we become flooded, as the Gottmans refer to it. I use that term and triggered interchangeably. So when I'm working with a couple and one has become flooded, I've got various techniques that I teach them that they can use in the moment. But key to doing that in the moment and pausing is to have the awareness that that's exactly what's happening for them in that moment. Otherwise, the compulsion to do what they've always done, to do these autopilot behaviours, will win out. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. And they'll stay stuck in their suffering. But these clients, Belinda and Craig, they did what they knew that they must do in order to save their marriage and their children from being exposed to these unhealthy coping strategies and this conflict management style, which wasn't really management anyway. It was just reactive and very childlike, coming from their inner child. They learned to take a time out. Sometimes they made some mistakes before they got to that. But they were determined to get back up and try again and again and again. And that's what it's like when you're going through the couples counselling process. Some people come in here and think everything's going to be fixed in a couple of sessions. In my experience, that's not the case, because people don't ring me when they've just had the one argument or something like that. It's usually a lot further along. Something's been going on. There's been some real suffering that's been going on, and they've drawn a line in the sand and said, we can't do this anymore. Either we're going to separate or let's see what we can do. Let's be open. On average, couples will work with me maybe 15 to 18 sessions, maybe longer. And that is really aligned with the findings from the Gottman Institute as well, who recognise that on average couples will have about 15 sessions, those that commit to the process anyhow. But what they get out of it is really up to them. So I can provide all of the support and all the resources, but like Belinda and Craig, the ones that commit to the process are the ones that get the outcomes that they're looking for. They wanted connection. They committed to putting their phones down. It's the 1%ers that they chose to take every day by sharing a love spark with one another and surprising one another, sharing that fondness and admiration and being grateful for the other, expressing that. Being their word, which was really important for Craig to start doing more of, because he had been doing behaviours that didn't line up. He wasn't home when he said he would be. He'd say, if we have a fight, I'm not going to leave next time, but he would. And these contributed to her lack of being able to trust in him. He wasn't in integrity with their higher value of trust and being trustworthy. And even just for himself, it was an incongruent feeling for him, misaligned with his own values, particularly working in a field where the ethics of trust and morals are highly important. So regardless of what walk of life you come from, who you are, who you know, what you do, where you are, people are people, and we all have feelings and all suffer. But if you're willing to do the work, you can change your story. You're the author of your story. And what you choose to do in moment by moment, each and every day, it matters. So ask yourself, is what I'm doing today, does that line up with my marriage values? You may not even be aware of what they are. And that's why we develop the life values cards, so that people can be more aware in that way too. They can be more aware and make the right decisions in each moment, every day, in alignment with their marriage values, their relationship values, their own personal values. What's most important to me? Is it important to me to go down the pub and drink 10 beers of a night? Or is it more important to me to have a close, loving relationship with my partner and children and go for a walk each night? When I'm working with couples, and particularly with Belinda and Craig, one of the things we identified was the abandonment issues that she was experienced in her childhood, and the way that her parents fight, and how that impacted on her, and her stance that she would take in the dance of their conflict, and breaking that intergenerational cycle so that their children could have parents modelling to them the ideals that we all seek. Being the partner to one another, the husband and wife to one another, that they want for their children in the future. Teaching their children this is what a healthy relationship looks like. And this was the leverage, I guess, for them. That this was the motivation for them to do the work, because there wasn't much left at the beginning. And towards the end of working with them for a little bit over a year, and doing intense work, gradually they were on a good path to recovery. And they continue to do the weekly catch-ups. They continue to use the resources and the skills provided. And sometimes still they're a little bit wobbly and make mistakes, and that's perfectly normal. So I hope that you found this helpful, and I look forward to sharing some more stories with you. Perhaps you could give me some feedback on whether this is useful or what else you'd like to see videos on. Thanks very much. I'm Jacqueline Hogan, your couples counsellor and coach, in person in Macrae and online via Zoom. And we have retreat options available for people who are wanting to do some fast work and come down and have a little bit of a holiday as well. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks very much.